Ready?
All right. Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Two Angles on Angling. This is Jordan with my co host.
It's Ryan, guys. What's up?
All right. So, as you can literally see, things
We're
are
trying
different
it.
now. We're
We're trying it.
trying it. So, going forward, a vast majority of the episodes will be available on YouTube with the audio and visual aspect. Certain ones that we do maybe from the water or just like the shorter segments in the winter and stuff, we might not always record them, but we're going to be going with this going forward. Just give you guys more opportunity to see us, see what we're talking about. I know a lot of people like watching their podcasts as well, and for you know other aspects throughout different episodes. If we have different lures and stuff to talk about and all that, we can
Actually,
offer,
show you.
yeah, actually show you and offer a bit more depth there. So, all right, back to our normal agenda. So we're gonna start off with our like observations, air, land, and water for the last week. I'll start there. So did not get outside much the first half of the week. Working a lot and just we had kind of crap weather anyway, so it
Yeah.
wasn't much to do. But Friday got out of work and I went and fished Art Park for a while. The water had some color to it, but it didn't. I didn't look at it and I wasn't like deterred by it by any means. So went and fished that for I don't know a couple hours and had fish jumping like right in front of me a few times,
Mm.
which was nice to see, but no action, no activity. So the guy that I talked to intersecting as I was going down there said that he caught two browns, and I was like, oh, all right, well, there's something at least, you
Yep.
know. So all right, I'll take that as a positive sign. Um, Bird wise, there. Actually, both two of the days I went fishing, I saw a great blue heron. That was awesome. The first day on the lower, and then fishing 18 on Saturday. So that was a cool bird sight. Always, it's one of the bigger birds that we have
Yeah,
access
dude.
to
They
see
have
around here. It's
that rookery on Motorboat Island is
mm,
already loaded with heron.
yeah,
The white egrets and blue herons are already like fully nest in that thing.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah, always cool seeing those. Other bird observations. Just obviously the standard ones that robins and cardinals and blue jays and uh, wrens and sparrows and all hosts of different birds so far.
yeah, none
Ooh,
of the
the
crazy.
one earlier in the week that I texted you about actually was I saw that one of the merlins
Yeah,
on
that's
the
sweet.
power line heading. I was driving to my dad's and I was getting near the stop sign. I looked up and I saw a bird up on the power line. I'm like, it like I could see talons, and I was like, "That's like a pretty decent sized bird." Like I don't, it would. Well, I'm like, it's definitely not a red tail hawk or
Right.
anything, but I'm like, it's bigger than like a songbird. So then I kind of stopped and I turned around and I was looking up at it. And I'm like, "Oh wow, that's a merlin. That's awesome." So sent you that text. So that was another observation a little earlier in the week, but and like I said, so I fished 18 Erie on Saturday. So yesterday, we're recording Sunday, like almost 4 o'clock right now,
Yeah.
I believe. Um, and so I went with a guy I met at work, John, and he kind of showed me the ropes. I haven't, this is my first year really like, well, it is my first year fly fishing for steelhead. So, uh, he had a rod and everything all set up for me, and he showed me the ropes for it, and I was like, all right, this is awesome. Like I have, I think I could have gotten it done. Well, I could have gone about it the same way rather
Right.
on my own, but he definitely plugged in a few different aspects of where approaching different spots and stuff. I was like, okay, that's cool, and also just a different way to roll through there. So we were indicator fishing, and then we had it down to a egg and then from there down to a, what's it called, a zonker, a white zonker. And um, at first, getting the depth down, like yet again, with nymphing and fly fishing and all of this for me, the tactile sensation is much different than Ned
Yeah,
rig
then
fishing.
finishing. Yeah,
So the little adjustment, even compared to float fishing, obviously, like a little adjustment float fishing, okay, yeah, depending, it might make a major difference, but like, as I'm noticing with nymphing, like it really is like you got to be like precise with that float, and where you're positioning it. So after kind of getting that figured out, and getting through the whole snagging bottom, and finding a good
yeah,
depth where I was like bouncing but not snagging, I had a few bumps early on. The watercolor was great. It was running, I think, at like 110, so it felt like good flow. So we got out there right around sunrise, and didn't have much going on. He ended up catching a sucker in the one hole, and I was like, all right, whatever, man. Like it's action, like
yeah.
something's happening.
They're in there spawning,
Yeah.
getting
So
ready to.
so then he went down a little bit further, and I kept fishing this one hole because I did have a bump, and I was like, whatever, I'll just keep running through here, see if something can happen. And I turn, and I see he's hooked up, and I see him. He releases the fish, and he comes over and tells me. He's like, and I was like, what was it? And he's like, oh, it was a steelhead. I'm like, nice. And he's like, yeah, but like its jaw was broken. And I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, like its whole entire jaw was like just like hanging limp. And I'm like, oh my god. I'm like, so someone, I'm guessing, I don't know, it could have been from spawning, I guess,
No,
but I have no, like,
I made
someone
a
just had
guess,
to
but
have like abused that thing when they caught it, and however they caught it. But anyways, plus that there was a steelhead. Obviously, a little bit of a minus there that it was in such bad shape, but it was still willing to eat. So I guess it's got
yeah,
good spirit. But then from there, bounced around a little bit more, and he took me to this one hole, and he was like, "All right, there's always a steelhead in there. Like you got first dibs on it. Like go at it." So fishing through it, and I'm like, "All right, I really don't know." Like I felt like I got all the good areas, and I was pretty consistent with it. And then he was like, "All right, let me hit it a few times before we leave." And I'm like, "Okay." So I'm like, let me step back and watch how he approaches this, see how it's different from what I did, and all of
right.
that. And the one thing I will say is he that I picked up on throughout the day is he was willing to get a lot closer than I felt comfortable. So that was something
I
to
mean, line
take into.
management, dude.
Yes, yeah,
Like
that was a
fly
huge.
fishing is just huge on line management. Like it's like most people think it's about casting, and like casting is only one part of it. Like
Yeah,
you have to the thing that makes fly anglers think that it's takes so much superior skill. Like getting it dialed takes a lot more work than other types of fishing. But yeah, casting with a bait caster, I would argue, is equally difficult. Like doing precise casting with a bait caster, especially flipping and pitching
yeah, yeah,
and skipping. But anyway, you got all that line, and it's just water's moving it.
yeah,
And if that's on the water, like you want to minimize, like if you are fishing dry flies, if you're indicator fishing, or if you're euro nymphing, you want to minimize the amount of line touching the water
yeah,
because you're trying to make that thing move drag free as
yeah,
like naturally as possible. Um, and so if you have any like if you got fly lines, a lot of fly lines sitting at your feet and a bunch on the water, like you're gonna fail. Like you're not
yeah,
gonna get a good presentation. And the other thing too is getting as far as getting close to the fish. If the water's got like if you're looking in the water and you can see a steelhead, it can see you.
mm-hmm, for
But if the
sure.
water's got like a decent stain to it and it's not super sunny
Yeah,
and you're not casting a shadow, you'd be surprised how close you can get. And the other thing, like those fish are used to people. I mean, this isn't the first time. I'm not like
yeah,
it's worth testing your boundaries because you should always try to minimize the amount of line
yeah,
that you have out there. Like if you can catch something close, you catch something close. Um, it's interesting to try to like bomb a bunch of line out, but when you're fishing small creeks, you don't do that. When you're
Yeah.
fishing the cat, there's areas of like the Cattaraugus Creek where you can bomb long casts out and
Hmm.
do all kinds of advanced line mending stuff on the surface, but you want to try to avoid doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway,
And so yeah, that was a lesson that as once I get into my fishing endeavors today, I'll elaborate on how that applied. But so he's fishing this hole and like third cast in on it. I'm watching. I'm like, wow, this is just like an absolutely perfect drift. And I'm like, it's tailing out, and I'm like, this is just like this is perfect. And as soon as it tails out for another second, it goes down, and I'm like, all right, sweet. And he's fighting it, and he's like, I think this is just another sucker. And I'm like, man, I don't care. And I was like, can I net it? Because I didn't get to net the other fish, and I was like, I need some action today, so netted it, and it was a decent sized one too. So I was like, all right, cool. And I'm like,
I mean they're
I,
native, so
yeah, that's true.
and from what I understand, I mean, we might turn our nose up at eating them, but they're back in the day. Lots of people used to eat them.
Mm.
You know. Anyway,
So I don't know the whole entire like breakdown of like that exact species versus those like lawn nose suckers that I catch at my mom's at like in the Pine Creek area
yeah,
there. But those things fight like hell.
yeah.
Like he said that these ones didn't fight that hard, and who knows? Like if you mentioned they're spawning, who like
I
you
mean, I'll
know.
put it to you like this: if you catch them out in the on the lake, because like every once in a while in the summer, if I'm fishing downstream of Roundhouse, just dragging bait through
Hmm.
there, and you're picking up tons of drum, like every once in a while, you'll pick up a sucker
Yeah.
that ate a crayfish,
Mm.
and they fight.
Yeah.
Like they fight hard in that current.
Nice.
So I mean,
Yeah.
but they're big. Like when you get them out there, they're
Yeah, they're
big. Like
big.
they're
Yeah,
tankers.
that's
You're not
awesome.
getting like the size that are in the
Yeah.
creeks. But it'd be interesting to, like, you're not allowed to do this, but it'd be interesting to keep like to catch some smaller versions of those and keep them in a pen for a little bit and then bring them out later on in the year. It'd be awesome if you can, but you're
Yeah.
not allowed to do that. But just to fish like an 8-inch
Yeah.
sucker, just drag that around on the bottom of Lake Erie in like 45 feet of water.
You'd catch some. Yeah,
Like
you'd catch the best.
so you might not catch much, but you're gonna cross something
Yeah,
that's giant.
quality. Yeah.
But anyway,
Um. Yeah. So just finishing off that day. That was all she wrote. So we bounced around to a few more spots and just kind of like elaborated or expanded a bit more on the area that we knew, and so did some exploring there. Didn't Wasn't any success, but it was still fun to get out. We it was raining most of the morning too, and by the time we were leaving, the flows were definitely up, and then checking the gauges later, things were really flowing, and then that's when you and I talked for a little bit on the phone, kind of getting a game plan for me because I was working today, but I was like I need like that I got that itch yesterday, and I was like I need to get out and I
try
need to
something.
cast the fly rod again. So uh, Ryan and I went over a bunch of smaller creeks that I could go to try out just because, not going to probably hold the mud as much, push through faster, clear out. So I went and did that this morning, and just as our common, everyone who listens often will understand this reference, but Ryan brought up again about I was like, well, I don't really have a lot of steelhead stuff. Like all I have is streamers, and Ryan said, "That's all you need, buddy." So and then he said, "We've talked about this multiple times. You know how I feel about it." So I'm like, "All right." So I was like, "Okay, we can do that." So I tied up a few, uh, took them out, and when I got there,
So based on the picture, you accessed it at the highest point upstream, right?
yes,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, and the water clarity was was marginal.
It's a cool hike down though, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
beautiful area. Yeah, just marginal water clarity. So
yeah.
I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but I was just like, okay, well, if I stumble into a fish, that's great. But I'm more so getting the reps in, casting, reading the water, learning where I
Right.
can wade on these spots, where I can cross, where I cannot cross.
It's a good
Learned
way to think
learned
about it, dude.
learned that learned that. I was crossing this one spot and I was like, all right, this is super shallow. Like this feels great. I took a few more steps, and it like I went like at least 2.5 foot down, and I was like, all right, let's try and find another area here. Good to know there's a deeper hole here. I can at least fish it next time
I
I'm
think I
here
know where you were when
potentially.
that happened too.
But yeah, so it was cool. Nonetheless, there was one other person I saw. And they were on the spot that I started at, and then I just kept fishing down. And as I was fishing down, I got into this one area where I was like, this water looks really muddy and sketchy. So I was like, I don't know, like, where a good spot to access this. I started slip sliding around. I'm like, all right, well, if I just pivot, I'm on the bend. If I just pivot and just cast angle downwards instead, because that's the only way I can cast without getting caught in the trees, I'm like, this should be good. And Ryan and I were talking, like in these smaller creeks, how you're going to more so be stripping it through instead of swinging it. But with how heavy it was flowing, like it wasn't really an option. Like it was swinging like fast. Like I was stripping it through, but it was just swinging so fast, and
Yeah,
I was just letting it rock. So yet again, I think this was right around when you and I texted about when I sent you the watercolor. I made a few more casts, and the one was swinging out, and it got straight. I did like one little strip, and I got a solid bump, and like I went to go set up, and it like the fly came flying at me. I'm like, all right, and I caught a scale.
nice.
Um, and that's
Contact was
that it was
made.
contact, and that was it though for the rest of the adventure. Explored more, found a bit more, a few more areas to hit up next time, but for whatever the 2 hours I had before work this morning, it was a good adventure, and uh, definitely gained a lot of confidence in the line management. So circling back to that, um, having fished this creek today, being substantially smaller, and with a lot of overhanging brush and trees, I was, that was something that was constantly on my mind. I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah,
I only need to be
you
able
got
to
to
make,
dial a roll cast, and
yeah,
you got to
yeah,
figure out how to do that because that's you could do that with streamers too. I mean, you probably
mm,
intuitively know how to do a roll cast while you're indicator fishing. Like you probably have figured that out without
yeah,
knowing what that cast is. Or,
yeah,
but there's with streamers in particular, like you can absolutely roll cast the hell out of those. I mean, when it gets to, I mean, it depends on the weight of your line and the size of the streamer, but
hmm,
if you got the right match there, you can absolutely
yeah,
roll cast the hell out of streamers, and that makes it to where the brush behind you isn't a factor.
yeah,
You just pick up and
yeah,
launch out.
yeah. Good point.
So,
But yeah, so I figured out like, okay, this is my max distance cast, and this is all the line I need to have out,
yep,
and that's it. So like on the one hole, like it felt nice. I was like, all right, and then just keep laying it back down, and I was like, because I saw this big rock, and I'm like, all right, high percentage area, like they're
all right,
gonna be sitting on the other side of this, so I just kept hitting it, and as I was cycling through like my thought process of like breaking down the water, I was like, okay, well, I was using that lighter colored one that I sent you that I tied up, and I did have the scale on it, and I had at least that solid bump and maybe one other. But then I was looking at the watercolor, and I'm like, okay, like if I just put on like a bigger, darker streamer, like would that be a more effective approach? Because I was thinking like if I'm any other situation, largemouth, smallmouth specifically came to mind. Like I'm going to go with a darker color,
yeah,
bigger profile in the situation. So that's what I did. It did not pay off, but I just, like even, watching it fall in the water column, I was like, okay, I can pick up on it a
right,
lot more anyways. So, that's a good approach. So as, going along on this whole fly fishing journey, building the box and the arsenal to fit the simple circumstances, like because I don't want to, as I'm getting into this new endeavor of line of fishing here, I'm not trying to go like crazy,
right.
and I just want the simple and effective stuff. And no, I did not catch fish, but due to I think more
Yeah,
conditions
that
rather
was
than preparedness.
those
So
conditions. You would have been lucky to have
yeah,
caught something. I mean, but yeah, I like your
yeah,
mindset though, man. You went and it was like, dude, got to get reps. Might as well get
yeah,
oriented to the creek. I know what to look for when I come back.
for sure.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Before I like vent on the conditions, let me think through things the way that you just did. So as far as the sky birds, um, the Bonaparte's gulls, so the smaller gulls that live around here, they're starting to get into mating plumage. So like
Mm.
what you like if you've just been cruising around and you notice the smaller gull throughout the winter, it just looks like it's a solid white gull. Like there's very little even gray on it. And then now all of a sudden you start seeing these gulls flying around here with black heads.
JDO.
It's those that black-headed bird is the same bird.
That's
It's
awesome.
just now it's getting into mating plumage. So you're going to start noticing those things around. That's a change. A lot of the diving ducks have departed the pattern. It's weird. I mean, we still have longtails around, but very few of anything else. Like I haven't seen teals around at all. Like all the canvasbacks and like all those things are gone. Like I saw a couple of golden eyes, still, you know, mostly common mergansers, some hooded mergansers, some red-breasted mergansers. Um, that's mostly what we have around here now are them.
Yeah, that's what I saw on the Saturday
You
as
know,
well.
I saw my first kingfisher today,
Nice.
which was crazy. It was awesome to see that.
Was
Um,
it epic?
no,
No.
it was
Okay.
just cool. It was cool. It was cool to see.
Not a
I
bald
was happy
eagle.
to him. I said hi. Like, yo, what's up, bro? I haven't seen you in like 6 months, man. Um, the what else? I mentioned the herons and the egrets
Yeah.
already. They're not all here, but that if you go to the end of if you go to the Sheridan Drive boat launch, you'll see them. I mean that like the egrets especially are there. Um, I saw my first Caspian tern on Lake Ontario.
Mm.
Um, it was totally by itself. I haven't seen any common terns yet. And you heard flickers 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago. I've like throughout this week, I've heard them around. Not a ton of
Nice.
them, but I've heard them. I also, when I fished Lake Ontario, I ran into like two eastern phoebes that were in
Mm.
Wilson, and it's usually like mid-April, so they're like kind of on time when those two birds are in that spot every year.
Yeah.
Like every year that I've gone through there, those two birds are in that spot. Um, so yeah, but I haven't seen any of the smaller like warblers and stuff. Like I
Mm.
haven't seen any of that crew pop up yet. Um, so that's basically what I've seen that's new in the sky. As far as the fishing goes, there, man. I mean, I had every day booked this last week, and I only did one paid trip, and I fished 2 other days just to see what was going on. Because Monday was crazy wind. Tuesday, we had uh, a lot of ice. So something happened on Monday where there was a boat. I think it was a grain ship tried to get into the harbor, but the harbor was full of ice. So then ice cut, and then that boat got stuck, and ice cutters from Canada came over. And the bottom line is like a ton of ice Monday afternoon got sent downstream because they were freeing this boat and like clearing the harbor out for ice so that boat could do its thing. So the river completely filled up with ice Tuesday, like bank to bank, from the upper Niagara to the lower Niagara. It was completely loaded with ice. Um, Now I'm looking at that, and plus, like Tuesday, it got cold again, and there were
Mm-hmm.
north winds. Ended up canceling that trip too. So come Wednesday, I was booked. Tuesday afternoon, I'm looking at the water, and I'm like, it's full of ice. I'm like, man, there's no way this will be clear by tomorrow. Plus, it was supposed to rain pretty heavy, Wednesday. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cancel tomorrow. There's just no way this would be cleared out.
Mm-hmm.
I went down there Wednesday morning. It was all clear. The water clarity was perfect. Like, I'm like, oh shit, man, I should have totally fished today. So my one paid trip Thursday, we went out. But Thursday there was insane wind. Oh wait, by the way, Wednesday night into Thursday, it rained like close to 2 inches.
Yeah.
Like we got hammered with rain. This area, like when you were talking about that creek that you fished today, that it was blown out. Like we
Hmm.
didn't get any rain here, man. Like we had
Yeah.
like 15 minutes of rain at one point, and it wasn't
Yeah.
even that hard. Like so, it seems like the South towns,
Hmm.
but like the Southern tier in general, got way more rain than we did. And like my buddy Joe, who lives out in Ransomville, they didn't get any rain at all
Hmm.
yesterday. So it was weird. It must have been pretty localized and stayed down south. Like I know Pennsylvania got completely hammered with rain this past week, but anyway, like Wednesday night it poured. So Thursday we went out and it was super windy, but no rain and warm. Like it got into the 60s, like mid 60s. So I'm like, hey guys, we're like we if we go out, we're gonna catch fish. We might not hammer, but I can at least make a day out of it if you guys want to do it. Um, and they said, yeah, let's go for it. And we ended up having like a solid day. Like we caught two giant steelhead and a couple other smaller ones, some lake trout, one really freaking tanker lake trout, dropped a massive walleye, like an absolute tank walleye, and landed another one. And then got what else was in the mix? Brown trout too, like really nice
Nice.
brown. So it ended up being a solid day, and they were great dudes. We had fun, but the wind was howling on Thursday, just absolutely howling. So my clients for Friday flew in from Florida. Now I'm telling them, I'm talking to them, and I'm like, look, we have great water clarity. There's no ice. Like we'll be fine. And I mean, think I fished, Thursday afternoon. Everything was
Hmm.
great. They flew in. They stayed at Niagara Crossing. They looked at the river before the sun went down. They saw it. It looked great. When I got there Friday morning to pick them up, it was completely destroyed. Like so, all the as I came like last as I was coming home, the Upper Niagara was getting super full of ice. Because the waves were so big from the wind coming across Lake Erie that it just pushed ice through the ice boom and sent just a shitload of ice downstream. So the whole upper, except for like a thin band next to Grand Island, was full. And that ice was kind of pinned there by the wind.
Hmm.
So the lower hadn't gotten any of that yet. Well, overnight, the wind let up and all that ice came downstream. And all that 2 inches of rain that fell the, the day prior, so Wednesday afternoon, we're now Friday morning, all that flood water finally made it
Mm.
downstream. So you had 2 inches of rainfall in the general region, which flooded out the Buffalo River, it flooded out the Erie Canal, it flooded out every single tributary, and all that mud just came down. But it took a long time for it
Hmm.
to get there, and I didn't see any evidence of it. I saw the canal was muddy, but when I was driving the river back, the river was fine. So the canal is always kind of off. I mean, it
Yeah.
was particularly muddy, but it wasn't raging.
Hmm.
And I didn't see buffalo, and I wasn't thinking about buffalo. But the bottom line is, when I got there in the morning, the river was full of ice, and it was also brown. Like it was like I couldn't see my prop stained.
Hmm.
So it's like, what are we gonna do? You know, what are we gonna do? And I was like, well, maybe we can go out into the lake. I'll just dodge icebergs, and we'll go out to the lake and troll for Lakers. So I went out to the lake, dodged icebergs the whole way out, got out to the lake. The mud had already made it out to the lake. I mean, there was a massive mud plume. Like I went like almost 6 miles to the east and couldn't find clear water. So I'm like, oh. Then I'm like, well, if you guys don't want to quit, I got nothing else to do. Like, if you want to go to Wilson, let's go to Wilson. So I pulled the boat out and went to Wilson, and it was pretty much the same scenario there.
Hmm.
Like, it wasn't as dirty, but it was still like too dirty to be effective. And I ended up pulling planer boards for a little bit around this mud line for about an hour or so, and we didn't looking for browns, and we didn't touch anything. So I called it a day, and it's like, yeah, sorry about that, guys. Mother Nature like totally screwed us. I was then that brings us to Saturday, and the river was totally full of ice most of the day Saturday. But so I canceled the trip because it was supposed to rain most of the day, and it didn't. Like what we were just talking about, it didn't really rain here. Um, so I ended up canceling my trip for Saturday because I didn't want the guy to come up to
Hmm.
encounter the same thing that I had
Yeah.
just encountered. And it turned out that the river still had ice in it, but you could have fished it, and the water clarity improved by a lot. But then it did rain a little bit, which
Hmm.
the bottom line is I could have fished that day. It would have been a pain in the ass dealing with the ice, but I'm glad I canceled it. Now to today,
Hmm.
you know, I thought the ice, like I went and looked underneath the Rainbow Bridge midday yesterday, and there was a huge ice bridge there. Like it was bank to bank ice. The whirlpool was bank to bank ice. I didn't think that the river was going to be clean.
Hmm.
The water clarity was excellent when I looked at it, but I didn't think it would be ice free. Well, so I canceled the trip. My buddy Joe went down there in the morning, saw that it was clear. He called me and he's like, "Dude, it's clear." I'm like, "Well, I already canceled my guys, man, and I'm kind of glad I did." There was a big northwest blowing, so it was cold, and when there's a northwest, you can't really do much on the lower. There's only a couple of areas
Yeah.
that you can go to. So Joe's like, I'm like, well, dude, if you want to fish, I'm loaded with bait. I mean, we can get out just to stretch our legs for a couple hours, get some reps in.
Hmm.
It's kind of like what you did this morning. So we ended up going, and it sucked. We
Yeah.
caught two fish, we dropped two others, but like I got a solid brown, like a nice one. It's probably like 7 or 8 pounds, I guess. I don't know, maybe bigger. I don't know. I always have a hard time gauging the weight of those things. And then Joe got a spawned out female steelhead. So yeah, it was super slow. So the bottom line on the fishing this past week is lots of chaos, lots of rain, flooded out creeks. Like the fact that you were able to get out into the creek that you were with your buddy, that was like a small fleeting
Hmm.
window. That creek was on its way down.
Yeah.
And obviously, you saw like near the headwaters that it was muddy. It would be even more muddy downstream in
Hmm.
that same creek. So there just hasn't been, from walking creeks to fishing from the boat. There just hasn't, this past week did not have many opportunities. Like we've been battling ice, crap water clarity, wind from multiple
Yeah.
directions, huge shifts in temperature, just chaos. And the bad news is like this upcoming week is the same thing. Like colder this upcoming week. Like most of the week is dominated by north direction winds, which is keeping the temperatures in the 30s and 40s. Um, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all like marginal at best weather. Like Monday, big northwests. Tuesday, a calm kind of morning, and then a huge southwest that carries all through the night. So that Tuesday, if that southwest comes the way it's forecasted, that means by Tuesday night, the or Wednesday morning, the upper Niagara, if not the lower Niagara, will be loaded with whatever ice is
Yeah.
still out there. Which isn't that much, by the way, but I'll get to that. So Wednesday could potentially get shattered, which leaves maybe Thursday it's clean. I mean, maybe, but Thursday it's supposed to rain again and like may possibly snow in the morning. Huge east winds. Those east winds tend to push ice away from our bank, like out into the river channel. So there'll be more ice, you know. So that's like the next 4 days are screwed. Like I've already canceled my trips. You could find windows in those days to fish if you wanted to, I'm sure. Like I have guys coming from out of town for 2 days at a time, Monday, Tuesday, one group, Tuesday, Wednesday, another group. I'm not going to have them come into town at a roll of the dice, especially
Yeah.
what I just experienced this last week.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm sulking. I'm not optimistic about what this upcoming week holds. I think like by the weekend we'll be uh we'll be leveled out, and like I mean, I have a hard time trusting like super like longer range forecasts, especially beyond 5 days. But the longer range forecast into next week unfolds, it looks like we'll be in spring like stuff,
Hmm.
like 50s consistently, light winds out of the south, like stuff that we can actually fish.
Yeah.
Which then brings the point about the ice. Like I don't know how much ice is left on Lake Erie, but it's super minimal at this point. Like I pulled the ice boom camera and looked at it a few times today, and it's just such a narrow cone of view. It's hard to gauge, but inside its field of view, there's big chunks of open water. Um, and there's a northwest wind blowing, so that kind of makes sense. Like it's pushing the ice away from Canada, like over to our side.
Hmm.
So I can't really base much off of like what I can see with the camera. But all I know is this, man, and eventually I'll sometime this week, like next week, I will have driven the skyline and checked it out with my own eyes. Um, because you can't like there's satellite pictures that
Well, I
happen
mean,
too.
yeah. What I can tell you is like by Wanaka and all that, like that was all pretty damn clear.
Really
Yeah. I
interesting.
mean, like not. I mean, not a crazy amount, but like yeah, there's yeah a good chunk there. At least a football field or two out, and pretty expansive
But
stretch.
just sporadic icebergs mixed, or just straight up
It
clear.
was clear, yeah.
No
A
shit.
lot of
No,
ducks
then
and
that's
stuff.
awesome.
Yeah, a lot of ducks and stuff.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then and you could just look at the graph. Like the graph says it's something like 8 or 9%. Like that boom can come out. Like I think most of everything that was like from the wind and the rain and all the shit that we experienced this past week, I think it like really knocked that ice back. Um, because like we mentioned last week, they didn't pull the boom out on the first like they normally do, because there was too much ice out there. Now that's not an excuse.
Yeah.
Like there's enough where they could just pull it.
So speaking about the of the boom, I have two instances this last week. So Tyler Cooney, what's up, brother? I know you're watching. He sent me a picture and he was like, "I think I'm seeing a piece of the boom flowing down the river," and
In the
it's
lower,
I think it was the upper. It
yeah,
was the
yeah,
upper,
I've
and
seen many
it sure
pieces.
was.
Oh yeah,
And then I saw another video on Instagram this morning on the lower of two pieces that went over the falls, and I'm just like thinking about that process in my head. I'm like, that's nuts. Like these things just,
yeah, dude. I've seen
yeah,
at least 5 pieces this year, between the upper and the lower, and yeah, and I mean that win that happened Thursday, right? Because like if you look, because I look at that freaking webcam on the ice boom like probably once or twice a day, every day. Um, and so I'm used to seeing like I'm looking for changes, and that the wind on Thursday did damage to another chunk of it. Like the way the buoys aren't arranged the same way that they
mm,
used to. Like there's another hole in it. And so I just think stuff's leaking out of there. And my general point is they should be able to take it out this upcoming week. The question is, will they? You
mm,
know, well, like that I don't know. But based on what's currently there, if they like in my mind, if they were thinking about anglers, which they're not, but if they were thinking about anglers, what I would say is this is like, look, the next 4 days are going to be pretty crappy weather and nobody's going to get out on the water anyway. So this is ideal timing.
yeah, pull the pin.
Like pull it and
Yeah,
let it happen. Like,
yeah,
because if they use the excuse where it's going to lock up and create problems, it's like, look, man, that's already happened. Like it happened twice this past week because of wind. So the thing's not doing its job. Just get it out there and let Mother Nature take its course at
yeah,
this
and there's
point.
not much left.
But
Yeah,
I seriously doubt they're going to do that. The thing is they're only going to do it when the weather's right. I don't know what that means to them. Like tomorrow you could totally do it. It's northwest. That area is sheltered from a northwest wind. You could pull that out easily. And in fact, the wind will be pushing ice away from the boom, so they could totally do it. But they're not going to. Tuesday will be huge southwest winds. So they're not going to do it Tuesday because they're right at the end of the wind corridor. Will they do it Wednesday? Like, I don't know, but they should totally, because look, I want them to do it. They might as well do it now. And
Yeah.
part of it is selfish, but I guarantee you that there's very few charter captains who are keeping their trips on the book for the next at least
Yeah,
couple of
for
days.
sure. Yeah.
So all of us will be off the water, or most of us. So if they pull that boom out, like they're doing everybody a favor.
Hmm.
Um, because once that thing's gone, the water can warm up.
Yeah.
Like once that thing's gone, everything will start to change.
Yeah,
But
get the ice cubes out of the cup.
we're just staying in this perpetual freezing
Yeah.
cold state, and the pattern is not going to change until that
Yeah.
temperature changes. Like there's like some steelhead are going through the motions for sure, but the, in tributaries it's different because the water is warmer.
Hmm.
So those fish aren't like going into an ice box,
Yeah.
where they are on the lower. So you're just not going to catch any. One and two, there's just not many of them there right now. The ones that are there, like some of them have already spawned, which is just strange. So I don't know how many fish are down there. But the browns don't need to eat a lot when it's 33 degrees, like it's
Yeah.
so once that starts kicking into over, like once that boom's gone, the ice will start melting and it'll flush out of the system. Everything will start to warm up and things will get awesome. I
Yeah.
just think we're probably 10 days away from that, to be conservative about it. And I'm not saying that it's not worth fishing between now and then. I'm saying that Lake Ontario is definitely worth fishing. The lower is worth fishing like through everything quickly and seeing what happens. But Lake Ontario is really the place to be. And we don't have the right weather set up for Lake
Hmm.
Ontario. So until then, our options are limited. As soon as the water is flushed out of ice, we gain more options. There's just way more to do. We can, you will start seeing more people, and we'll actually have fish move around, and things will just get way better. But just waiting to that point. And it
Yeah.
is it is frustrating having to cancel a bunch of trips. But I just think it's the right thing to do instead of going out there and trying to get paid. And look, there's certain situations where look, if I'm 100% transparent about what to expect, and if there's people who just want to get out and do it because that's the only time they can go,
Yeah.
like I'm happy to take them out and we'll make a day out of it. Like we're not going to skunk, like we're going to catch fish, but it's just not what this area is. It's not performing, at what this area is known for right now
Yeah.
because of all the confluence of all those factors.
For sure.
So, um,
In due time. In due time, we're
yeah,
getting there.
yeah, we just got to wait it out, you know.
We're just running behind compared to the last few years, so it feels, I guess we've been kind of spoiled maybe as well the last few years, but it just feels like way worse I guess now because it's like we're used to.
Yeah,
I was thinking April 1st 2020 is when I caught my 6 pound smallie, and we were out on Lake Erie with no problem whatsoever. So like that would not have
yeah,
been an
and
option April 1st this year at all.
the other thing too, yeah, like in my memories from last year, um, popped up today was a picture of a triple that my buddy Matt Mazer and his fiance and his good buddy we tripled on smallmouth in South Gap of the harbor.
Nice.
We were pounded. I was catching smallmouth 2 weeks ago last year. You know, every year is different for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Yeah.
But what like looking like way forward again to June or just the general weather pattern between now and the summertime, what I really would like to have happen is we just warm up very slowly,
Mm-hmm.
because what can happen for sure is shit can flip and things will get warm real fast and the pattern will condense into a
Yeah.
very short window and it'll be awesome and insane during that window. But then it'll peter off just as quickly as it started up. Whereas if you get this very slow warming trend,
Mm-hmm.
it stretches things out. You'll have
Yeah.
bass in different. You'll have pre-spawn bass. You'll have like bass will just come in slower waves.
Hmm.
So you have some fish show up early. There'll be mid-season fish, late season fish. They'll all get into spawning at different times. Like the salmon bite will last a long time in Lake
Mm.
Ontario. There'll be even walleyes will stay super shallow, even after they're done spawning. Come the opener in May, like all these really cool things can happen as long as it warms up really slow. If it warms up really fast, like yeah, it'll be awesome for the people that are slated to fish during
Hmm.
that period. But it can also get crappy on the
Yeah.
margins leading up to that. So on the weeks leading up or right after it. But it'll also mean though that the walleye bite on Lake Erie will get really, really good really early, and everything else will just go to the wayside if
Mm.
if, if that happens. So we'll see.
Yeah, different
We'll see.
dealt a different hand every year. Got to just go with the flow of it and see what Mother Nature has to provide for us.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things I was thinking about this week when I was writing my report was that my my weekly write ups are way longer when I haven't fished much. Like I think my report this week that'll come out later on this evening is something like 1,700 words, and I only fished like 3 days, legit 3 days. Um, so I'm like, where? And then if I fished every day, my report is not verbose at
Yeah,
all. Like
yeah,
I default to just take in the pictures. I'm not gonna even like a lot of times I'll put in my report. Hopefully, the daily play-by-play says it all for you. Um, you know, I don't. I'm mentally tapped. I can't
yeah,
write that
yeah,
much
yeah.
more today. And so I think it's interesting that like being out there fishing. A lot of people think of it as this super relaxing experience, and it is. Like it can be super zen. But what you don't realize while you're doing that is I don't know that I would use relaxing as I don't think that's the right word for it. And I don't know what the right word is for it. Maybe we can figure that out. But what I've noticed when I fish is that um, all of my senses are turned on. Like what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling, what I'm smelling, what I'm seeing, like all of these things are all like dialed into this experience. And I've said this a bunch of times in the past where my vision is blown out. Like there are times where, like, sure, if you're indicator fishing, you're fishing a dry fly, or you're fishing top water, and you're staring at that bait, that's one thing. But if you're finesse fishing, or generally when I'm guiding, I might stare at baits for a couple of seconds, but I'm also looking in another direction, see what the current's doing. I'm paying attention to what other boats are doing. I'm making mental references of what's going on in the bank. I'm watching everybody's rod tips at various lengths of time, having to control the trolling motor. Like there's just constant little things, and have
Yeah.
conversations with people. There's like all these things that I'm just doing intuitively. I don't think about doing them. I'm just doing them because I've been doing it for a little while. But what you don't realize is you are still doing those things. Like even if you're not thinking about it,
Hmm.
your brain is still operating to make sure that those things are happening. It's just not happening in like the forefront of your mind. Like you're not consciously thinking about them, but some portion of your brain is processing all that stuff, and it's working. And so when I come home at the end of the day, like my mind is more exhausted than my
Yeah.
body. And not that it's stressful, it's just like your mind is kind of tapped out. And so I don't have much left
Hmm.
to be able to like contribute creatively to
Yeah,
something.
yeah, for
Like
sure.
it's all gone. And it's not,
Yeah.
I don't look at that as being problematic. I just think it's like it's just one portion of your brain that's turned on. Like you can't have both of them turned on at the same
Yeah,
time.
there's a time and a place.
Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and think about like any days like that you've spent, whether like fishing or hiking all day, or you're outside camping and you're outside all day. Like those nights of sleep, like it's usually like
Yeah,
you're
you're
out
right.
like a light
You're
because
right
like your
out.
mind is just you've experienced so much compared to like I guess the in a good way you've experienced so much compared to like the day to day of like the average life I suppose working, um where it's more like negatively stimulating things versus being outside is more positively stimulating things, and like that relaxes your brain
Yeah,
versus like the other the negative ones are like
or just
spiking
no
your
stimulation at all. Like
yeah.
that's like, dude, you're making me think about something from a totally different angle that I hadn't
Because I'm
considered
trying.
before. Is like that's a huge issue for a lot of people in this country is being able to sleep well, and you'll oftentimes hear people say when they go camping or if they go fishing, like, all this fresh air is making me tired. And it's like, yeah, that's not what's making you tired, man. Like what's making you tired is there's a portion of your brain that's working that you don't normally work, and it's just constantly running. Like it's running a lot because you have way more stimuli. Like I'm that like I've had this conversation with my daughter a bunch of times. I'm like, you can think that that phone is stimulating, and I got it. Like when you hold that bright illuminated rectangle in front of your face, it does all kinds of cool stuff. It shows you all these things, but the thing is you're zoomed in right there, right? When you go outside or fish, hike, whatever, I hiking is like the least stimulating out of all of them, in my opinion. Like, and it's not knocking it. I'm saying, like, okay, you can hike, but let's say you hike and fish. Well, now so not only are you hiking, but you're also doing something else that's like stimulating a whole other part of your brain. Like it's same thing with being out in the water and fishing. Like when you're at the mercy of a current, you're like, I'm not fully in control. I have to adapt to this thing that I'm like plugged into. Um, so you have all these things turned on in your head that you aren't normally used to having turned on. So to your earlier point about negative stimulus, to me, yeah, I mean, let's not label negative and positive or whatever. It's just like what our brains have been built to do for
Mm,
thousands and thousands of years versus what they're actually doing right now.
mm,
And like I think if people talk about like sleep hygiene and staying off of uh, not watching TV before you go to bed or not being on your phone before you go to bed, et cetera, et cetera. I would say that if you're tired enough, those things, like, there's lots of people who pass out in front of the TV. There's lots of people who fall asleep watching something on
mm-hmm,
their phone. In broad daylight sometimes, like taking a nap. If you're tired, you're going to fall asleep.
mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that those lights don't have some effect on you. They probably, keep you awake a little bit longer or whatever. They have some level of stimulus. But what I'm saying is if you're tired enough, that level of stimulus is going to be meaningless. So it's probably a good thing to do, but a better to avoid those things before you go to bed. But it's probably even better for you to spend the last hour or so of your day walking around outside and doing something outside. um, where you're not zoomed in here, where you're full blown out here.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can kind of, people will say, well, you're winding your mind down. No, you're winding, you're actually speeding up a bunch of other stuff that you aren't normally used to having to work with and exercise. I think that'll get you tired.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've never looked at it like that. Yeah.
Maybe that's why so many people in our population have sleep issues, is
Mm-hmm.
because they're not getting that other part of their brain stimulated. They
Yeah, and
just
your
have,
literal focus is so much more narrow compared to like
right.
the broad
And look,
focus
like there,
of
there is a requirement for narrow focus,
yeah.
like for building things, for building things and cooking things and like preparing food, etc. Like, or making tools. I guess that falls into building things,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a requirement for that. But you
Yeah.
like doing it all day long, like you're neglecting something else. You're neglecting the other side of your, or some other side of your brain that gets stimulated by kind of, I think of it a lot as like plugging into the matrix. But like you would think, like you sitting at your desk doing, you know, uh, screen work would be like plugging into the matrix. But I would say that like everything, if there is a matrix, right? If this is a simulation, real like everything going on outside is that, like so like because think about it this way, man. Like you're in your house, you are fairly protected, right? You have really not that many challenges. You're living in something that's rectangularly shaped. It's generally climate controlled,
Yeah.
so you don't have to worry about it being too cold or too hot. Um, you have blankets and clothes around. You're safe from the elements. You're safe from any predators that might get at you. So, like all of these things that you would normally have turned on if you're out there are completely shut down. Like you're, you know, basically kind of sedentary, and you're just, you know, you lose appreciation for all the different risks. When you go out there and you have to engage into all that, now you have to turn all these things on that aren't turned on when you're in your house. That includes just getting into your car and driving around. But it's something as simple as walking through your neighborhood, or for an hour or so, just gets you connected to something that an exercise is part of you that you just don't
Mm-hmm.
normally have exercised. You know, and it seems menial and arbitrary, but I, there's so much more stimulus out there. Just so much more. You know, how could there not be?
Yeah.
Between birds flying around and cars driving by, depending on where you live. If you live in the country, the
Yeah.
wind blowing insects
Wind,
around,
rain. Yeah.
birds, mammals, like there's just so many, like all of your
Temperature.
senses.
Yeah. All of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of your senses can get
Yeah.
engaged with that. But I think a lot of people think that if it's not initially like right in your face visually stimulating, it's not stimulating. And yeah, I mean, if you've gotten to that point, man, I'm sorry, but I don't believe that you're there. I really don't. But if I believed that that was possible, I wouldn't be a charter captain. But I, I think everybody, when taken out of this environment, like the inside environment, and put outside, and compelled to engage in the system that's out there, like your senses help you plug into it and,
Yeah.
and be part of it. you know so I don't know, that's proves my point that I can just go on crazy rants like this because I haven't fished much.
Yeah. For sure, dude.
you know
Yeah. And
like our
that's.
our summer podcasts will be probably quicker, like more to the point as far as
Yeah.
recording. But one of the things, like now that we're integrating into this video that you and I have talked about, is um, because we'll be fishing a lot more late spring all throughout the summer into the fall. um, and it'll be harder to just go on, and we always kind of come up with a little bit of something, but it'll get harder to do that as the busier we get, um, to flesh out each one of these podcasts. Will have short clips of some of the fishing that we've done throughout the week, so you have at least something else visually
Yeah.
stimulating to accompany the podcast afterwards. So
For
um,
sure.
but cool.
Yeah, looking forward to it. A lot of great things coming down the road here. Just updated my website, JD Outdoors Co. So it is no longer JDO Lure Co., but JD Outdoors Co. Updated the gallery on there. I have some new products up there. I'll be posting some more after we wrap up this evening as well. Um, New blogs. Got another one coming out as well this week. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that and everything happening with Two Angles on Angling and Brook Dog Fishing and spring is here. It is slowly coming to fruition, and we're going to be getting on the water a lot more, having a lot more content for you guys, and a lot more stimulation for us as well.
Oh yeah.
All right, tight lines. Peace.
See you guys.